Ladies and gentlemen, independent Americans around the country and around the world. Holy shit. There is a lot happening in the world, and it's hard to keep up with, but we are staying at the intersection of national security and politics with leaders who are living, breathing, working, fighting at that intersection. And the timing has worked out that we had previously scheduled a guest who I've been hoping to get on the show for a long time, a guy I've known for a long time, a guy who's been a patriotic leader in Congress and beyond. Joining us straight out of meetings related to everything happening, the great and powerful Congressman Seth Moulton is here on Independent Americans. Welcome, sir.
Paul, thanks for having me. Good to see you.
So, we got a lot to get to. We're obviously going to talk about skiffs and Hegseth and Tex, but you're a leader. You're a dad. I start every conversation with the same question. Some folks are nervous. Some folks are scared. A lot of folks are outraged. Where are you right now, and how are you?
I'm outraged, but I'm not surprised. I've said from the very beginning the second Trump term is going to be worse than the first. And I've also said that every time you expect the Trump administration to do something bad, they do something worse. And that's exactly what we're seeing play out here. Now, I'm a very bipartisan guy. I call balls and strikes and have been very critical of the Biden administration, for example, one of probably the leading critic in Congress, along with Peter Meyer, of their Afghanistan withdrawal as just one example. So I've been never afraid to criticize my own party or a Democratic administration, but this Trump administration is really off the rails to the point where it puts the lives of Americans in serious danger.
And you are in Congress right now. You've been coming for meetings. I know you're going to get briefings throughout the day and are going to be having reaction. We all have now seen the latest installment of the Atlantic download with the actual chains of conversation. I know you're going to react, but let me start with the target. What are you going to do about it? What are you personally going to do about it? Because I think that's what folks want to know. Will you call for Hegseth's resignation? I personally think he has to resign. He can't effectively lead. I would argue they've all violated OPSEC in that chain, and they should all resign if they had any honor. But I know you're still coming together, but what are you going to do about it, Congressman, for folks who want action, who want accountability, and are concerned right now about the lives of our men and women in uniform?
I have called for Hegseth's resignation already, but more importantly, I'm trying to encourage my Republican colleagues to actually do something since they're in charge of Congress. And the reality is that as powerless as many Americans feel, some of us Democrats in Congress feel powerless as well because Republicans control the House and the Senate, and they're not fulfilling their constitutional duty to put a check on the executive, to actually control the budget. Congress is supposed to have the power of the purse. You learn that in elementary school, and yet my Republican colleagues seem to have forgotten it. Why? Because they're just scared of Donald Trump. They're just scared. They know the right thing to do. They understand the oath they took through the Constitution, and they are not upholding the Constitution because they are personally scared. So what I'm trying to do is convince these Republicans, let's do something together to actually get the reins on this administration before they get people killed.
So staying on Hegseth here, who knows if Trump decides to fire him by tweet before this drops on Thursday morning. We're recording this on Wednesday morning. But what are the levers that you all can actually flex here to do something? I mean, folks have been understandably frustrated by the Democrats' inability to stop them. You couldn't stop his nomination. If Trump doesn't stop him and you don't get any Republicans to cave here, like we saw last time on his nomination, what tactically do you have at your purview to be able to tackle this?
I mean, not a lot, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to keep speaking out, speaking up, putting in very stark terms what Hegseth has put at risk here. Because American lives are at risk when you disclose classified information. That's the whole point of why it's classified. In some cases, it's specific people on the ground, like intelligence operatives or the fighter jet pilots who are piloting these missions and need to do them in secrecy, not have them disclosed before they happen. In broader terms, though, it's the whole security of the general public, of the United States of America. Because when our adversaries know what we're doing, when they can hack into the conversations of our leaders, because they're holding them in places that are not secure, right? That the reason that you're not allowed to do this on Signal on your unclassified phone, walking around the supermarket, sitting at home, or wherever else, is because it's not secure. So our adversaries can listen to what you're doing. You know, this isn't just some nice idea where you're supposed to be in a skiff like I was this morning for a briefing just before this. And by the way, had to check my cell phones at the door, my AirPods, even my key fob had to be checked at the door, right? I don't get to have that in there and put classified information on my Signal chat. Yes, I've got Signal on my phone, but I don't use it for classified information, right? So there's a reason why we do this, because American lives are at stake. And if it turns out that pretty soon our adversaries, if they're not already, going to be listening in to these Signal chats among the people making these national security decisions for our country, then American lives writ large are going to be at risk.
Seth, you were a platoon leader in the Marine Corps. I was a platoon leader in the Army. We all know loose lips sink ships. We all know OPSEC. I posted some of the basic Army information this morning so folks can understand how OPSEC is taught, right, in basic training. If a guy in your platoon went on signal and said, "We're going outside the wire in a Humvee at 5 o'clock," what would you do as a platoon leader, and what would be the expectation in response to something like that? So folks understand beyond the levels of classification, we're talking about like basic OPSEC protocol.
I
Can you
would kick
talk
him out
about
of
how you would handle that and how most enlisted folks would be treated in a situation like this?
I would get him removed from my platoon. He would never go on a mission with us again. He would be removed from the Marine Corps, and I would ensure that he's criminally prosecuted for what he did.
And we saw this as recently as last year. A National Guardsman was sentenced to 15 years for stealing and posting stuff. Do you think it should go beyond Hegseth? I mean, again, if it was the whole platoon in the chat, right? Like we have here, we have Tulsi Gabbard, who you and I have known for decades. We've known Hegseth for decades. If all these folks are in the chat, should they all resign? Should there be, or should they be removed?
Every single national security professional on that chat knew that it was wrong. They knew that it was wrong. And my understanding is that this is not a one-off thing, that they have these Signal chats going all the time, dealing with highly sensitive or classified information. And in fact, I've heard that they're still going on today. Every single one of them knows that's wrong. It's illegal when it comes to the handling of classified information, as we've discussed. It's also illegal when it comes to the retention of records, something that is required by law of the executive. You know, when we get these files in presidential libraries as allowed by law, it's because these records have been retained. That's part of following the law too. They broke that law as well. So there's two major categories of laws here. I'm no lawyer, Paul, but there's two big categories of laws that they have broken, and every single one of them broke it, and every single one of them knows.
Just by being on there, right? I mean, just by being on there.
Just by being on there, right?
Right. So
If I
if
ever
we
was
take
on a
that,
Signal chat where, you know, if you and I were on a Signal chat and someone put in classified information or started discussing stuff that shouldn't be on the chat, I would immediately say, hey, we're not discussing this. Delete immediately.
so how do we not call for the vice president to resign as well? I mean, he's a Marine. He knows this, right? I mean,
It's amazing how many of these are veterans, right?
yeah.
And a couple of you've talked about how everyone in the military, from the lowest private to the highest officer, and these were all pretty junior officers. I was a junior officer in the Marine Corps. We've all been educated on how to maintain and control classified information. People like Tulsi Gabbard, who served in Congress, got a re-education when you come here to serve on a national security committee. But we also learned some basic lessons like leadership by example and accountability. You take accountability for your actions. You lead by example. Why should anybody in the Department of Defense, why should the average Lance Corporal or private today think that he shouldn't be able to discuss operational plans on Signal? Because the Secretary of Defense is doing it and he's getting away with it. And not only that, but he's getting away with it by lying about what he did, rather than taking accountability. I think we'd be having a different discussion here if Pete Hegseth had the honor, the decency, and the basic honesty to just say, yeah, I screwed up. I should not have done it. I will never do it again. Here are the things that we are changing to make sure it never happens again. And it is my fault. Now, in my opinion, he should still resign, but we would still be a very different conversation. Instead, what is he doing? He's not taking accountability. He's lying to the American public about what happened.
So I'm going to take that as a pass on the VP. You're not calling for his resignation.
Sorry. I got distracted. Of
No,
course he should resign as well.
VP
Because
too, right? We're talking about the VP.
all these things apply.
Everybody on there
All
should
these things
resign.
apply. Yes, he should resign as well. Now, there's a political reality here, which is that you're probably not going to get that many heads to roll. So let's talk about the primary perpetrator, the guy who, national security professionals are honestly debating. Do you think he's this incompetent, or was he also drunk? That's what people are talking about with Pete Hegseth. Lots of reports of him continuing to drink on the job after promising, swearing under oath that his alcoholism would be a thing of the past. We all know alcoholism is a big problem he has had. He swore under oath in his confirmation hearing that he would stop drinking. A lot of reports coming in from the field, troops out there who've seen him out there drinking on the job. But that's where we are with the Secretary of Defense. So let's start there and get some accountability in this administration. By the way, good little quote, Paul. Accountability is back.
Yeah.
End quote.
I saw your press conference yesterday, and I think that you were quoting Hegseth. I think, and I want to stay on that because this is an important moment for our country, and this is independent Americans. You've got a lot of people in this country who are sick of the Republicans and sick of the Democrats because they feel like they're doing crazy shit and you can't stop them. So yesterday, you were there with Pat Ryan, who's been on this show, who I think is a strong and thoughtful leader. But the Democratic Party's got the lowest favorable rating in modern history, 27%. This is a question of whether or not the Democrats can actually do anything. So you're stepping forward. You and Pat and others are going to be in the spotlight on this issue. The real question is, can you do anything about it? Do you really think you can do anything about it? Or are we going to watch you guys get rolled again like we've seen so many times before?
Well, again, the elections have consequences, and Republicans are in charge of Congress right now. So our ability to do anything about it does, in fact, depend on Republicans. We're going to keep speaking out. I'm going to keep having these conversations. I'm not going to be afraid to say what people are saying behind the scenes, like this guy might have just been drunk, as if that's an excuse.
So how do you tackle that?
The point is, Paul,
we know you guys are gonna say a lot, right? And we know what they're gonna do. And are we gonna just keep coming to the same point where they say, "Fuck you guys, we're gonna keep rolling," and you guys say, "Hey, you shouldn't," but they just keep rolling and you don't have levers? I mean, what is out there? Impeachment, further investigations. What can you do to?
I mean, you're going through the list. I know it's frustrating. I get it. I get that people are frustrated. I'm frustrated too, right? Yep. But there's not a brilliant answer. What I've said. And I've been very outspoken about the problems with the Democratic Party. I've said Democrats need to be focused on doing two things right now. One, standing up to Trump however we can. And yes, we're filing lawsuits. We are speaking out. We are holding him accountable. I mean, I hope you saw my clip when I just happened to be on CNN when the Oval Office meeting with Zelensky was concluding. And I said exactly what I believe to be the truth, which is that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are cowards. That's how they behaved in front of Zelensky, who's a hero. They behave like cowards. So I'm not going to be afraid to call it like it is, tell the American people what's really going on here. But the other thing that Democrats need to be doing is looking ourselves in the mirror and fixing our party so that we can win again. Because we lost badly an election that should have been a cakewalk. We were running against a convicted felon, okay, at the head of a party. This should have been a cakewalk, and yet we lost across the board. So Democrats also need to have the honesty, the integrity, the humility to say, hey, we've got to make some changes because we've lost touch, by definition, with the majority of Americans. And so that's why I've not been afraid to call out the Democratic Party and say we need to make some changes ourselves.
Can I ask you, Seth, you're a strategist, you're a political strategist, you've been a military strategist. Part of strategy is creating priorities. The Democrats don't seem to have a unified strategy, a unified leader, or priorities. In this moment, do you help them prioritize? For example, who is the Republican that can be moved? When you're talking to folks, a lot of folks who are listening are Republicans. Many of them are independents. The last time we knew, Joni Ernst was critical and she crumbled. Now, in this moment with Hegseth, where would you recommend people focus their energy in trying to move Republicans that might be movable?
Well, I think you need to talk to Republicans who are in tough districts, because they're the ones who have to listen to Democrats and Republicans. So not the deep red Republicans, but the ones in tough districts. And I think you should also appeal to Republicans who are veterans. And that's what I've been doing. I mean, I had an extensive conversation with this about this with a Republican who fits both of those descriptions, checks both of those boxes yesterday. I'm not going to use his name because I don't want to make this harder for him than it already is, but I'm trying to get him to come around and say, it's great what you're saying to me right now personally, but you need to say this out in public. Actually, I had that conversation with two Republicans yesterday, but one in particular who checks these two boxes that we just discussed. So find Republicans who have to listen to Democrats, find Republicans who must have some sense of duty and honor because they served in our military and understand what it means to keep our national security safe. But honestly, the other thing that Democrats do need to do, and I'm super focused on this as well, Paul, is start winning elections, right? So I have this organization called Serve America I started that was instrumental to taking back the House during Trump's first term. In fact, in 2018, when Democrats had to win back the House because Republicans, just like now, controlled everything in Washington, more than 50% of the seats that we flipped in the entire country were my Serve America veterans. And so we're trying to repeat that now for 2026. There's a lot of bad stuff that can happen between now and 2026. I get that. But we also can't keep our eye off the ball that we've got to win. That the number
I
one way we
appreciate
can
that.
fix this is
Yeah.
winning.
I appreciate it, but I think you're right. I mean, folks can't wait till 26 because who knows where we'll be by then, especially when these guys have got the nuke codes. And I appreciate the long view.
Well, you got to do
Ironically,
both. You got
yeah,
to have
you've
the
got to do
short
both.
plan,
Some
and you
of
got to
your
have the long
candidates may be up against some of the independent Veterans of America candidates, and that will get interesting. But if they're not, I hope that you and other Democrats will support independents who can win. People like Dan Osborne, I think, have shown what's possible.
I did support Dan.
Right?
In fact, I supported him with Serve America. Dan Osborne was a Serve America candidate. He came close.
He did. He really did.
You
And I
know,
think there's an insight. Let me ask you. I know you got to go in a couple minutes. I want to come back to something that doesn't get enough coverage, but we've been staying on. In the midst of all this, they are going to lay off 60,000 people at the Pentagon. That's roughly 20,000 veterans. Nationwide, every day, thousands of veterans are being laid off. If they stay on path to firing a million people, we're going to see 300,000 veterans fired, right? And you and many others have worked with us to improve veteran unemployment, to tackle this, to create off-ramps. For 2 decades, we've been working on this. And now we're going to blow a hole in it. President Trump has not offered an off-ramp for all these fired veterans. Elon Musk is not offering them jobs at Doge. For you in your district, when a veteran is fired who served their country, they're fired without cause, they're stuck in this purge of people across the nation, where do you send them? A lot of folks don't know where to go, and there's no landing point for them. For you as a veteran, where would you tell your fellow veterans who just got laid off to go for a job?
first of all, apply to my office. Second of all,
Better get a bigger office, man.
there are a lot of, I know, but there are a lot of great state and local offices where you might be able to get jobs, and we're going to help you. The most important thing that veterans need to hear from this veteran serving in Congress, someone who, by the way, made a commitment to keep going to the VA even as a member of Congress so that I could get the same medical care as my fellow vets. We're going to help you. We're going to help you however you can, however we can. But let's also just, talk about the elephant in the room here, which is that the Trump administration hates veterans. That's not a strong statement. John Kelly, Marine General, former Trump Chief of Staff, has said, Trump said that they're losers and suckers. Losers for signing up, suckers for getting killed. We know that Elon Musk has no respect for veterans. He's slashing people at the VA. So veterans like me are going to wait in line. We're going to see veterans dying on waiting lists again, trying to get health care. Pete Hegseth obviously has no respect for veterans because he's unwilling to take basic accountability for his actions and lead by example. He doesn't have any respect for active duty troops. Tulsi Gabbard obviously has forgotten her fundamental values that she was supposed to learn in the National Guard as well. I mean, the reality is that this administration, for all their tough talk, does not respect veterans, and you can see it with their actions. Now, Democrats, by the way, have a huge opportunity here to show that we're going to stand up for veterans. And I'll be the first to say that there have been Democrats in the past who have not been great on veterans issues. But there are also a lot of great new Democratic leaders, like Paul Ryan. Sorry, Paul Ryan, like Pat Ryan in New York that you mentioned. There are other veterans. Look at the lineup we've got in the House: Chrissy Houlihan, Mikey Sherrill. I mean, these are great veterans who are leaders, who are making a difference, and are going to show America that if you want to take care of vets, then you should vote Democrat.
So I'm going to push you on that and say, please get back to us, because I hope you guys can create a strategy, right? Like, this is a moment for a veteran corps, a place to go. We've had Wes Moore on this show. He's offering to hire them in Maryland. Tim Walsh has done the same in Minneapolis. They are obviously extremely valuable, but they're also creating a backbone of what I think is going to be a really important opposition to Trump, not just veterans, but FBI agents, so many other folks that are patriotic, that put country over party. And the patriotic purge may become a really important focal point of this and lead element of this opposition. But they're going to look for voices beyond politics. Is there anybody that you can point to or that you're looking to? We haven't heard from President Obama much. I've talked about that. I've called for CQ Brown to speak out. Is there anybody that's not a Democrat or a Republican that we can look to in this moment that can maybe transcend this partisanship and get more of America behind them and go above politics and really create a counter narrative to unite people in a way forward? Is there anybody that you look to or you're waiting to hear from that we can look to?
Well, look, I think there are a lot of great Americans out there who believe exactly what you're saying. And by the way, country over party, that's a Serve America phrase from 2018. People before politics, Serve America phrase from 2018. So Serve America is my strategy. If you haven't heard about it, look us up on live, serveamericapac.com. Look at the leaders that we have gotten behind, people who do, in fact, put the country first, who are not partisan, who remember these basic values of what it means to serve your country, where it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican or where you come from, what your religious beliefs are. You're going to do the right thing for America. I remember when I first ran for Congress, Paul, I had thousands of conversations all over my district. I'd never run for anything in politics before, never been involved whatsoever in politics. Was recruited by a nonprofit trying to get veterans to run for office to change our politics. And the single most memorable conversation I had was with a Navy veteran of World War II. I met him at the Agawam Diner up in Rowley, Massachusetts, on the side of the road. And he said to me, Seth, if you win this race, promise me that you'll go to Washington as an American, not as a Democrat or as a Republican, but as an American. And that's exactly the kind of congressman that I try to be every day. Now, there is a reality in today's political world that the Trump administration and the Republicans who are blindly following them, they don't respect vets. They don't respect our Constitution. They are trampling our national security. That is a political reality. But I never forget my guiding light. My first principle is that I am an American. I'm proud to serve this country, as I was in the Marines. And as I've often said about being in Congress, it's the second best job that I've ever had.
I appreciate it. I remember that when we were first introduced over email by a mutual friend, when I first heard you were running, and been rooting for you ever since. And I think a lot of folks are rooting for you, and they're also watching to see if you all can create a strategy and ways to actually slow this down, because it's so much bigger than party. If you and Pat ever decide to leave the Democratic Party, I think you will be welcomed with open arms by millions of independents around the country. I hope you'll come here first to share that. But in the meantime, baseball season starts tomorrow. I wish the Yankees lots of victories over your Red Sox. And more importantly, I wish you the best, and know that we're rooting for you, and we need you, and we're counting on you more than ever before. So thank you for your leadership and your service, and especially for your time right now. I know you got a lot flying at you. Thanks to you and your team and your family for all you're doing right now, Seth. We appreciate it.
Hey, Paul, thank you. Thanks for your long history of service to this country, both in and out of uniform. I'm sure as hell not rooting for the Yankees, but I am rooting for you.
All right. Thanks, my friend. Go get him. Semper Fi. Stay vigilant.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.